Today we're going to complete our hand-carved mahogany salad set. This is the piece I made a couple days ago, and I didn't have time to finish it because I had something else I needed to do. This is actually my first commissioned piece, this salad set. Now here's a piece of scrap wood I had from a very long spoon I made, and look at that nice grain there. Will it work? Not that way. It will work this way. We can get that nice circular grain to come out right in the bowl of our spoon. Let's see, do we have enough to complete the handle? We do. Just enough. So I'm going to use the original spork to outline the shape for the spoon. Once I have that on the wood, I'm going to darken it up so that I can see it easily while I'm working. So let me just go over these light lines with the pencil. You'll be able to see we just got away with it. We barely have enough to get the curvature for the spoon bowl and the handle into this piece of scrap wood. That's what I love about carving spoons. I get to upcycle, recycle, use so many pieces of wood that would otherwise go to waste. Look at that circular grain. It'll end up right here in the bowl, and that'll be beautiful. This is the length we need so this piece in my right hand can go away, and on the left, that's the end of the handle, so that piece goes away and that piece goes away. And then it's off to the bandsaw to cut off that top piece. You can see now with that gone, we do fit the length and contour of the spork that we previously made. So we can replicate the shape. What happened to that circular grain that was going to be in the bowl? Where did it go? It was right there. And now it just seems to be gone. We're going to have to trust that it's still in the wood. We saw it before we cut that top section off. So I'm going to mark the center through where the grain lies now so that we can get some symmetry to the grain down along the handle. And we just have to trust that when we cut away the wood from the inside of the bowl, we're going to have that circular pattern back where we initially saw it. Let me just darken these lines up and refine the shape of this spoon. And I'm going to give myself margin for error, especially around the bowl of the spoon. I like to leave about 1/8 of an inch there. And I'm going to leave a little bit more right there in the neck of the handle where it joins the bowl, because we can always shave away wood to make sure we match the spork, but we will have a very hard time trying to add wood if we take off too much right now. So as I refine the inside shape of the bowl, you can see I'm leaving around the rim 1/8 of an inch margin, because as we shape and sand and scrape away to refine that edge, that margin will slowly disappear, and we'll end up with a very nice thin edge on the bowl of the spoon. Let's see, it's fitting. Now we're going to have to carve a heart in right there. We want it to be a match to the spork, so we're going to try to get it in the same place. And then we'll put this into the bench vise where we'll tighten it down so we have a stable place to work. Notice this cork that I've added inside the vise and along the bench surface. It gives it a lot of bite while protecting both the workpiece and the bench vise. I'm using a 735 gouge and a 720 curved gouge. And we'll begin very cautiously, just probing the wood and feeling how the grain and the blade work together. And we'll start to define our edge around the bowl inside the line of margin that I've given along the rim. And I'm just feeling how the blade works with this particular piece of mahogany, getting a taste for it, getting a feel for it. And I'm learning where the resistance is, where the wood might be prone to tear or pull away from the grain, and where it slices cleanly through the grain. And you can see how I use the curve of this particular gouge to follow the line that I've drawn inside the rim of the bowl. So I'm defining that edge now, cautiously, and just beginning to remove some material to form a bowl. What I'm already learning, what the wood is telling me, is at the back of the bowl, near where the handle will come out of the bowl, you can see that the grain is torn away where I've been carving out material. And yet at the front of the bowl, near the tip, it's smooth. You can tell because it's actually has more sheen to the surface because it's a finer surface. So near the back of the bowl, it's tending to pull out and tear, while at the front of the bowl, we're getting nice, clean cuts. So I'm going to experiment turning my blade, even cutting across the grain, to see what works best in this area. Another thing this is telling us is we do have a convergence of different grains in this area, so I trust we're going to see that circular pattern again right here in the bowl of the spoon. And it's early in this stage of carving out the bowl, so we have some material by which to learn from right now. And I always take these opportunities as a learning experience, getting to know the particular piece of wood that I'm working with. See how it's all torn there? So we'll try different techniques. Here I'm cutting across the grain. You can see and even hear the difference as opposed to cutting with the grain, or the sound and look at the tip of the bowl when I get a nice clean shave. And everything I learn now while I'm working with the gouges will also help me when I start to work with the scrapers, because the scraper's a blade, a little different type of blade, but it's a blade just like a chisel or a gouge, and it's used for taking away fine shavings of wood. So what I learn about the grain and how to deal with it now as I use these very sharp gouges will help me a lot when it comes time to use the scrapers to refine and smooth the surface. And as you look at this surface now, after I remove these chips, you can see that there's less tear out and it's a lot smoother. So I'm actually learning something because I'm listening to what the wood is telling me. I'm learning how to work with it, and I'm not fighting against it. And that's the true virtue of understanding nature, learning to listen to what nature has to teach us all, because we are a part of nature, and we've evolved on this planet along with every other species of life here, flora, fauna, animal. And if we just learn to listen and work in harmony with nature, life can be so much more beautiful, so much more enjoyable. It's one of the things I love about working with wood and carving spoons in particular. It's extremely enjoyable. Right now I'm going to transition to the 720 curved gouge. This helps me as I get deeper into the bowl, shaping the sweeping sides of the bowl. And because the blade is 20 millimeters wide and 15 millimeters less than the 735 gouge, there's less surface area of the blade that's in contact with the wood, so it's easier to push through this hard mahogany material. And I can still have a lot of control as I try to refine the bowl of the spoon, removing any high ridges and trying to give the surface a common depth so that there are no holes. That's the whole object of carving. Once we feel that we have our bowl deep enough, our new objective is to smooth it out and give it a nice, smooth, uniform, and symmetrical shape. And I'm working with the tools that I have at my disposal. I happen to have just these two nice gouges. So I'm working with what I have as best I can, as you will too when you carve your spoons. We'll work to the best of our ability with the tools and materials that we have at hand. And the wood will yet give us something beautiful and not disappoint us. And as we work to refine the bowl and reach that symmetry, using one of these curved scrapers to gauge how we're doing is a good idea. We can see how evenly the bowl is shaping up. And then go back to our gouge, and in this case I'm using the wider 735 gouge again, to remove some of the ridges, some of the scallop shapes, and refine symmetry and depth of the bowl. And if you look closely, you'll notice that I don't always use the center of any particular gouge's blade. I look for the curved shape that best suits the shavings that I want to get. And I'll use either the center like I did there, or sometimes, especially up near the narrower part at the top, I'll use more of one side of the gouge. As you notice, when I get towards the tip of the spoon, I lean more to using the left curve of the gouge there, and I am using the right side of it here. I'm turning the blade to fit the particular shape that I need, and then applying pressure as is warranted to remove the shavings I need to remove. The secret is keeping control of the very sharp edge, and when you're using one particular side or other of the gouge, not to catch a tip and create a deep gouge that you will not be able to recover from at this stage. Again, I'm using the scraper here to gauge the shape, and it looks good, so we're going to move on to the scraper and use it to finish off our bowl to a smoothness and consistency that will require very little sanding. So keep in mind what the surface of this bowl looks like now, and follow along as we clean it up with the scrapers. The darker areas are the areas that haven't come into contact yet with the blade of the scraper. In other words, they're the recesses, and the lighter areas are the areas where we're removing material from the surface. And you can see the fine shavings that are ending up in the bowl that I need to brush away. This is working like a tiny little surface planer, and the curve of the particular piece of metal scraper that we have will help us define the curve and the arc that creates the inside of the bowl. So we want to turn the scraper to match the shape of the bowl that we want, because if we use a tighter curved area of this scraper in our bowl, we can create a valley or a shape that is inconsistent with what we want our final product to be. You can see how nicely it's coming along. Right there, you can see that dark area is a deep gouge that we'll need to work down to. And to remove it, we're going to have to actually remove material from the entire remaining surface of the bowl, not the depressed area. We're going to work the remaining surface down to that depression. And so we have quite a bit of material yet to take off, but we want to do it in a very controlled manner, using the shape of the scraper that fits the shape of the bowl, and slowly taking away shavings until that entire surface there works down to that depression. And then we can smooth it all out and make it uniform. And this process will go a lot quicker and be a lot easier using the scraper rather than trying to accomplish the same surface with abrasives like sandpaper. And so the darker areas show us how far down we have yet to go, both at the tip of the bowl and back here where the bowl meets the handle. And we'll just keep working along and smoothing everything down to that level to even everything up and give it good symmetry and a fine, smooth, refined bowl. And as you can see, we're making good progress. Everything's coming along nicely. Scrapers are a very effective tool, and they do not cost a lot of money. And as I said earlier, this will take less time and be a lot easier than trying to get the same smoothing effect with abrasives like sandpaper. So a little extra work put in at this stage using a scraper will save time and work down the road. See how quickly we're moving along in the process? And we can still clearly see what we need to reduce the rest of the surface down to. We can see the low spots, those are the darker areas, and so we'll continue. And let me say that while a scraper is a very effective tool, just like any other cutting tool, its effectiveness is directly relative to the edge that you keep on it. These fine shavings indicate that the scraper is sharp, that it has a good edge. Not that it can't be better, it's been a while since I have sharpened my scrapers, but it still has a sufficient edge to get this job done. Sharpening a scraper properly is a specific process, and there are wonderful videos on YouTube that you can watch that will teach you how to keep your scrapers sharp. And isn't that the beauty of a medium like this? Not that just because I make a video that means I know everything, but what I do know and can demonstrate on a video is there for anyone else to watch and learn from if they so choose. I have to say I've learned so much from watching YouTube videos. Not just technique, but I've also learned inspiration, how to be inspired and how to inspire others. And I have to say, more than what you talk about, it's what you do that inspires others. And when it comes to carving wooden spoons, I think the doing is so much fun. Okay, I think this bowl is looking good. It's really smooth, uniform, and symmetrical. And remember what it looked like when we started? Look at this. All the scallops and chop marks left from our gouge to here, where it's smoothed, ready for the final smoothing that we'll do later with an abrasive. So we're well on our way. And we're going to make a spoon that matches this spork so that we'll have a complete salad set. We have a lot of wood to remove yet. But I'm going to talk about carving the heart because it's going to be a relief carving. In other words, it'll be the highest part remaining on this handle once we take away the wood. So I'm looking at these small gouges, and these are things that I've had since I was 14 years old and never used. They're not particularly good tools, but I've sharpened them to a good edge, and I'm finding the ones that actually fit the curve that I'll need to make this heart. And then I'm setting a line, so to speak, a little indentation with the blade that will be a wall that I can come up to with the blade of my carving knife. That little indentation made with these blades will be an effective stop as I carve away the wood around the heart to leave the heart remaining. So I have a lot of wood to remove, and I'm going to do most of that on the bandsaw and then save the last few millimeters or so to be removed with the carving knife. And now what you're looking at is where I am after I've done the bulk of my carving. And I'm showing you these tear-outs. They were created with my carving knife simply by going the wrong way along the grain. And now with the spoon flipped over, you can still see those striations or lines along the handle that was made by the blade of the bandsaw on my initial cut. So that's the highest part of the wood, and from there I will carve away to reveal the heart. I'm also going to use some more scrapers and some rounded scrapers with concave openings to help smooth the outside or bottom side of the bowl. I simply look through my scrapers and see which curve will fit my bowl most properly. Maybe one a little smaller. Yeah, that looks good. That's going to fit the curvature of my bowl the closest. And I can use this effectively to smooth the bowl down to a common shape and consistency that will need very little sanding. And as I use this scraper on the outside of my bowl, it will help me make certain that one side is very similar, almost identical to the other side, simply by laying the scraper along the shape to check the symmetry of the curve. Watch this edge right here. Watch how quickly we can smooth away that edge using this scraper. It almost looks like magic, but it's not. The scraper's just another carving tool, another edge specific for a certain job, and it does that job really well. You may have noticed the pad that I have on top of my work surface. What this is an old yoga mat, and these come in many different thicknesses and surface consistencies. I really like them as a work surface on top of my bench. They protect the bench. They also give me extra grip and a cushioned surface, of course, when I'm carving my spoons, and that helps to protect the delicate surfaces and edges. And you may have noticed that in many of the spoons that I carve, the lip of the bowl is very fine and tiny. And I work sometimes on a piece of carpeting that also offers a protective surface for both my workpiece and my work surface. But I found that the grain of some woods can get caught in the fibers of that nylon loop carpeting, and sometimes along the fine edge of the bowl, the lip of the bowl, I've had a piece of wood get caught and tear out a little chip. And that basically requires you to remove more wood than you wanted and perhaps even change the final shape of your spoon. So I like this surface much better. It's smooth and soft, gives me a little bit of a bite, and yet nothing gets caught on it. It works perfectly for my purpose. Now I'm going to use a bit of a different scraper along the handle here to get a nice contour. And I'm not finding a real tight curve. I found one a little more broad than you might expect me to use. And the reason is I want a nice broad curve to this handle that flows very delicately into the widest part. And I'm removing the high spots that were left from my carving right now. So this is working out fine. You can see the shavings on my work surface. There's a lot of material being removed, and with the shape of the scraper, it's coming out very evenly. Now look at the grain. Remember the grain that we found in the piece of wood that we wanted to use, and then we seem to have lost when we cut away the initial piece off the wood? Well, here it is again, coming out, being revealed in all its glory, and it is falling directly into the bowl of the spoon. It's going to be beautiful. So I'm going to work a little longer, refining the shape all along the inside and outside of the bowl and the handle, getting this ready for our final step, which will be oiling the wood. After I'm done scraping, I'll move on to abrasives. I'll probably begin with something around an 80 grit, and then I'll go to 100, 120, 220, 340, 400, and because it's mahogany and it will allow us to have a very smooth surface, I'll finish up with a 600 grit abrasive. All these lines you see here are marks from the saw blade and the bandsaw when I removed that first piece. And they take some work to remove, but using the scrapers and the abrasive sheets, it comes out smooth just like this. And now we're ready to carve into the handle and remove some of the wood from around the heart and leave the heart revealed in relief. And I did demonstrate some of these techniques in a previous video, which I'm going to add some clips from right now. And you can see in the final stages of carving away material from around the heart, I'm using a very sharp carving knife as a scraper, moving right up against the shape of the heart and then pulling away to smoothly remove very fine shavings in the tight areas that will be impossible to access with sandpaper or any other carving tool that I own right now. And at this point, we'll be on to using just the finest of our abrasive sheets, the 320, 400, and 600 grit, because our surface is already fairly smooth. We will be refining our surface all the way down to the smooth grit of a 600 abrasive. And that will allow this mahogany to feel silky smooth in your hand and shine brilliantly once it's oiled. So attention to detail here at the end is important, because once we add the oil, everything will show. The beauty of the grain, the texture of the wood, and every mistake that we've made. So here's our original spork that we made a couple days ago. It looks good, but did we match it? Here's our spoon to complete the set. Let's give them a look. The contour looks good, the shape, the size, even the little heart. We seem to have matched them up pretty well. No two items that you hand carve will ever be exactly the same, and I wouldn't want that to be the case. I want everything that I carve each to be its own unique piece of art. Now my cloth is fully saturated with mineral oil, and as I rub it into the spoon, the grain is fully revealed, and we can see that circular pattern along the bottom of the bowl and inside the bowl, and it does look so beautiful. All the texture and grain in the handle comes out, and this spoon is looking a little lighter than the spork. That's most likely because the spork now has 4 coats of oil on it, and we're just putting the first coat of oil on this spoon. They were both actually cut from the same piece of wood, although this spoon was from 19 to 22 inches down the line from the spork. I think they'll come out looking very similar. Thank you for watching. You know, every time I carve a spoon, I learn something, and I hope you have too.